This week, I'm joined by Marty Grohman. You'll see in our conversation, Marty's involved in a bunch of different things. Marty is a former business owner. He is a former Maine State Legislator, ran for Congress. He's currently a Biddeford City Councilor. He had a podcast where he did 100 episodes before podcasts were even really a thing the way they are now. He's involved in a ton of things. Very well-connected guy. Learned a lot from our conversation. So I think you'll really enjoy it if you give it a listen. This is the Randy Forcier podcast. If you can do me a favor, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. I appreciate all the support. Thanks for listening. Here's Marty. Hey, Marty, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and pleasure to be on the Randy Forcier podcast.
Yes. Coming from a fellow podcaster yourself, I appreciate you taking the time. So a whole bunch of stuff to talk to you about. I sent you over a little hit list, get into some business stuff, local politics stuff. But I wanted to start from the beginning. Where are you from? And tell me a little bit about yourself going back before all this other stuff.
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 8 kids. I grew up on a small farm in Carthage, Maine, which is outside of Rumford. And the long history there, I managed to escape the farm, go to engineering school. I went to RPI in Troy, New York. I got a chemical engineering degree, and then sort of worked, believe it or not, in plastics for quite a while. And I was in Cincinnati. I was outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and looked around for positions. Actually worked in Vienna, Austria for a while as well, and realized there's no place like home in Maine. And so kind of started a business to get myself back here as a way to use my chemical engineering plastics talents, and didn't really know Biddeford, but it turned out to be the right place to start that business. That's what brought me here in 2000.
2000. So was it the space that you found that brought you to Biddeford specifically, like the industrial space, or did you know you just wanted to be in Southern Maine?
No, well, it was both. But yeah, I didn't know Biddeford at all. I remember I got off at the wrong exit, but the economic development director, Bob Dodge, at the time was really welcoming. And then I think an interesting piece of Biddeford history that sometimes you don't hear that much about, but the really early development of the compact disc was in Biddeford with the Gilardi family and their business called Shape. And it was an injection molding business that spun off a bunch of related plastics entities. And so when we were looking for space for the business that's now DuraLife Decking, we, found it here thanks really to Shape starting in the early 70s, and just that cluster of plastics development that's persisted. It still exists in the area.
That's really interesting to hear. I actually remember that Gilardi name. Had a friend who was friends, I think, with one of his sons, Anthony Gilardi, if I remember correctly. But now that you mention that, the whole CD stuff, that all rings a bell. But man, that was a long time ago. Obviously, CDs are old news at this point. But I do remember that. And my stepfather actually worked for Shape.
That's really neat heritage. And yeah, Paul is very active in the community. And yes, Anthony runs an injection molding business locally. And obviously, I'm a big sort of business supporter guy, so it's nice to see them doing well. But it was funny, we'd be setting up our machines, and we'd get down in one of the trenches to run some conduit or something, and there'd be a bunch of old, CDs and compact discs in there.
That's so cool. Wow. So then the company that you started in Biddeford was CorrectDeck, right?
Yeah, now it's known as DuraLife Decking. Yeah, co-founded it with another guy, Mike Kirkus, and proud of it. It's done well. The joke is it's doing better without me. And,
so a transition to the DuraLife name after you separated from the company, or did that happen before?
After, and they've done a good job with that. I don't have anything to do with it anymore, other than just being sort of a cheerleader. But it's in the Biddeford Industrial Park, right close to Prescott Metal and Volk Packaging and all those good businesses down there.
When you started that product, was that a newer thing to the market?
Yeah, we were one of the 4th or 5th, and people know the Trex name or AZAC, but we were probably, the 4th or 5th company to get into it. Yeah, so it was pretty leading edge.
When you say 4th or 5th, like in the world, in the country, or in the Northeast?
Probably in the world, yeah. We figured out a lot of things that are still sort of trademarks in the industry now, and proud of that. Never really got paid for it, but we started some things that are common now. Yeah. That's the way it goes.
And now it's all you really see for the most part. People don't really do anything but that type of plastic decking. I mean, I know certainly at my house and all the houses that I finance, that's what you typically would see.
Good. Well, use DuraLife. It's made in Maine.
DuraLife, absolutely, yeah. No, that's cool. So you decided to move on from CorrectDeck that became DuraLife. When was that?
That was in like 2009, 2010, and I actually sold the company. So I worked for the acquiring company for a while.
Yep.
Really was able to engineer a situation where the jobs and the factory and everything stayed local. So I made that the first priority, and I'm glad that it's worked out that way, and seems to be continuing to work out that way.
Yeah.
And then, I stayed there with the acquiring company like a lot of entrepreneurs do. I had a contract, and I left in 2014 because I was running for the Maine State Legislature and wanted to focus on that.
Yeah. What made you decide you wanted to do that? Was there a particular issue or knew something that you always wanted to do?
I think at the time especially, but still I really had a big passion for supporting business growth and entrepreneurship in Maine. And I wanted to sort of make that point within the legislature. And, it's here that, Maine is a bad place for business or to grow a business. But I had, the complete opposite experience. So I was trying to bring that perspective as much as I could to the legislature. And I had a good experience up there. I had a good run. I had great supporters here locally. I was there for 2 terms.
Yep.
2014, 2018, learned a lot of good friends. And there is this kind of under the dome itis that you get when you're up there every day and you're in this little crucible, and sometimes you don't realize the broader world is just trying to go about their business.
I can't even imagine what it's like to do that on a daily basis. So 2 terms was enough though for you. You felt like you had an impact and it was on to other things.
Well, I kind of flamed out and ran for U.S. Congress. So it was too big of a step, I think, to try to take, but, thought I would have that right experience or perspective to bring to that. And I definitely applaud all the people, including our local representatives, Mark Mallon and Aaron Sheehan, who, get up there every day and you're juggling, tens of thousands of issues at once. And obviously on top of that, need to do something to pay the mortgage because it only pays like $12,000 a year or so.
I was going to ask you about that. So you can't really do that as a full-time thing without working unless you're independently wealthy.
A lot of retirees do it. You can. It is someone who's in the sort of middle of their career, or maybe like yourself, you definitely could do it. There are good examples. State Senator Matt Pouliot is a real estate agent, people like that. I think he's maybe 35 or something like that. But it's not easy. It's a little bit rare. That's, I think, in part why you do see a lot of retirees. And I may try to get back up there one day and try to contribute and help out. We'll see. But I definitely applaud the people who are up there doing the work all the time.
Sure.
It's a ton.
Now, do you have a staff when you're a Maine State Senator, or are you expected to manage everything yourself? You must have people, right, that are reading bills for you and giving you opinions on legislature. Well,
that's, I think, part of the reason why the caucus structure kind of hangs on is you have, especially in the House where I was, there's 151 reps. So, is kind of this concept of voting in blocks is pretty important. And typically what the different caucuses do is meet at the beginning before session, and you don't have staff. There is some support offered to you, but yes, you're largely doing all of the work on your own and trying to get legislation drafted and get your bills through committee and so forth. So, but it is a team sport. The best way to do it is definitely to work together. I was rated the most bipartisan legislator for both of my terms, I think. And it was nice. I was proud of that. I liked being that guy who, as they say, there's not a Republican pothole or a Democratic pothole. It's just a pothole, fixed pothole.
And that's voted on by the peers? By your peers?
I think that's based on a voting record.
Oh, voting record. Okay.
Yep.
So that kind of transitions into running for U.S. Congress. I don't want to spend too much time, but you ran as an independent when you did run.
I did. Yeah. I believe in just focusing on issues. I really am I focus really on just one thing related to political parties, which has actually largely been achieved in Maine, which is great, which is something called open primaries, right? So we'll have that in the next election. So you previously to open primaries, if you wanted to vote in the Democratic or Republican primary, you needed to register as a member of one of those parties. And that'll no longer be the case starting in the 2024 election cycle. So I think that's great, because if you think about that, you're on the school board and school committee. So thank you for doing that. You're very aware of this issue. The budget will be voted on, and, turnout will be like 225 voters or something like that. Like, it'll be out of
fraction of the population.
Yeah, something like 9,000 that could vote. So that's what you see in the primaries, where you have this extremely, and I think that's one of the things that just ends up driving partisanship is, candidates veering way to the left or the right to try to win that primary. Yeah. And so now everyone, regardless of party affiliation, will be able to vote. And I think that's going to really help turnout. And hopefully that'll help some sort of more centrist
candidates.
Yeah, candidates and dialogue. Yes, exactly right.
Is Maine a leader in this? Because I actually haven't heard this. I wonder if other states are doing it.
We're pretty early. I think we're the 7th or 8th state to do it, something like that. It's catching on. And I'd like to see open primaries, and I'm pleased to see that being achieved. But yeah, that's pretty much the extent of my involvement in statewide politics.
It really is an interesting thing, though. Like you said, I mean, when people are running in the primary, they're just going so far right or left just to get that nomination before having to move back to the center.
Yeah, that is right. And you see a lot of things are already sort of settled at the primary level, where a Democrat couldn't win in this district or a Republican couldn't win in that district. So the actual election is the primary. So you hope to open that up, and I hope it'll end up having that effect.
So what was it like to run for U.S. Congress? Was that a big undertaking? I mean, obviously you have some people that are probably pretty well funded, and you're trying to compete with that as an independent. Was it anything surprise you in the whole process?
Well, I mean, I definitely have some regrets in the way that I handled it and lessons learned. I mean, I count my opponent, Shelley Pingree, as a friend, and she's certainly done a good job in the role, and used to, and I think is even more so maybe than at least how I looked at it in 2018. But I will say the big thing I take away is, I mean, you're a startup guy, business leader. It's really like a startup with a fuse on it, right? I mean, the product launch is on November 4th, whether you like it or not. And that, I think, is actually good perspective. If I sort of tried to think of it like another startup. And I built a really good team, and we still get together and trade stories of the old days, So it was fun in that regard. But it does take a pretty significant apparatus. I remember thinking, maybe with a few days before the election, that we had a team of 7 people, but the party has, 7 people in Berwick, 7 people in Elliott, 7 people in Kittery, 27 people in Biddeford, stuff like that. So, I mean, it is harder for the independents, and it's one way to approach things. And I think it does appeal to a lot of voters, but it is also kind of a divisive time where people are tending to, I think, sort of gravitate to one side or the other. So yeah. It's good perspective. Like my wife says, you had to get it out of your system. And I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Well, I found it to be very inspiring. I was actually at the kickoff to your campaign at the Pepperell Mill.
Yeah.
That seems like...
Thanks for coming. Yeah, that was powerful. That was neat to do. You're doing a lot of events and getting a chance to meet and talk to a lot of people and try to carry their issues forward. That is cool. And
that was before I even knew Amy. Amy did your intro, and I was like, wow, that was a great intro. And then I've obviously gotten to know Amy pretty well since then, but I thought it was great.
Thank you.
Obviously didn't get the desired result, but it definitely inspired someone like myself, so I figured I'd let you know that.
I appreciate that. Yep. Yeah, move the needle in some way then. That's good to hear.
Yeah, definitely. So after that, what was next?
Well, I processed a little bit. I certainly got very roundly spanked in the election, and it wasn't an entirely unexpected result, though, as the election got closer. And really, since then, I've been focused on clean energy and recycling and so forth throughout my career. The decking business is based on recycled plastic and recycled sawdust and so forth. That's always been a passion of mine. And for a long time, I had been a member of this organization called E2Tech that celebrates and advances companies that are working on issues like that in Maine and tries to push the sector ahead. And so they approached me about becoming a board member. And then, it turned out they didn't have an executive director or someone to actually lead the organization. So I was lucky enough to land that role. So it's one of these jobs that's kind of hard to explain if you're not in clean energy or sustainability in Maine, but you could think of us as maybe like a smaller version of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce that's just focused on companies that are doing clean energy like Revision Energy or ocean energy like Ocean Renewable Power Company, or also working in solar development or battery energy storage, or you hear things about the power grid and stuff like that. Most of the companies mentioned they're members of E2Tech, and I have a staff, and we do events and things to celebrate the sector. So yeah, I've been doing that ever since then, and we have something like 5,100 individual members or something like that. So,
wow. So that must just be exploding, or has exploded over the past few years.
Yes, that's an insightful comment, Randy. When I was lucky to join when I did in early 2019 because the solar legislation passed in Maine, and we have had a large number of companies join from across the country, bigger companies like Sunrun and Tesla, people like that are involved in this sector, of energy storage or solar development coming to Maine, and I get to take all the credit for it. So that's great.
That's awesome. Tesla's doing business in Maine?
Oh, yeah.
I always think of that as like a West Coast or Southwest thing, the battery stuff. I just don't know one person that has that system in their home in Maine, although I'm aware of it in other parts of the country.
No, it really works. Yeah, the Tesla Powerwall is, and of course now, we actually, and I should highlight this, an E2Tech member for a long time is a Maine company called Pika Energy that was acquired by Generac. And they're based in Grohman in the Industrial Park, competitor to Tesla in the home energy storage. People know the Generac name. So yeah, if you're thinking generators, they make them with just batteries now, and they're quiet, and there's you don't have to go get propane or whatever, and they work just as well or better. So that's highly recommended.
I would love to see a future where that's a bigger thing, where that's just kind of the standard in everyone's home.
That's my job. I would.
That's your job. So do you have to have solar panels to power one of those batteries, or do you?
No.
Could you plug it right into the grid and charge it that way?
Yep, charge it right up. Yeah, right in the grid, and you can do all kinds of good stuff with it now that there's time of use power rates. So I have 2 electric vehicles, so we charge them overnight because it's 6-cent power instead of 18-cent power, and you could do the same with your battery energy storage. Yeah, it's a real significant opportunity, and more people should know about it, and I highly recommend looking into it.
Yeah, no, I'll be sure to share some information on that. The cost per kilowatt hour is insane for electricity coming from CMP. So if there's, I don't even think of what did you say?
Off peak rates.
Hours?
Yeah. It's not as well known as it should be. Another thing that our members have worked on and advocated for. I think there's only something like 3,500 people on the new rate in Maine or something like that. But a lot of times at night there's excess power. They're trying to get rid of it, and they make it cheaper. And if you can use it at night, get yourself a heat pump, water heater, have it run more at night. Get yourself an electric vehicle, charge it at night. All those types of things, you can definitely take the edge off. With the obviously electric rates painful, but those are a couple approaches that do work.
Do you have a website directory?
Well, you can find us just at e2tech.org, e2tech.org. We don't put our full directory on there in order to prevent our people from getting spammed, but it's cheap to join or come to one of our events.
I'll check it out and I'll share the website. But all that stuff is very interesting to me. I did get solar panels priced out of my house last year, and then I have the whole thought of, I got to replace my roof if I'm going to do this because I don't want to put them on my 19-year-old roof. And then there's some mental barriers that I need to get over, but it's definitely something that's interesting for me, and I'll have to learn more about. And I know the guy to reach out to.
Mental barrier every month as you write that electric bill check. Yes.
Yeah. No, some decisions have to be made now that we're getting past winter and into the spring. So, but I know the guy to reach out to for advice.
You do, yes. And I spend the whole podcast on this topic, but you're right. Do the roof, put the panels on.
Yeah, because my house was built in 1998, I think. So I'm at that point where it's like, if I'm going to put panels on, I need to redo my whole roof. So
that's a pretty good run for a roof, 25 years. Yep.
Yeah. So besides that work that you've done, you also had a podcast. I know you're on break right now, but tell me about that.
Yeah, so I started in 2013 with the Grow Maine Show. Is obviously just a play on my last name, Grohman.
A great name.
Thank you.
I wish I had something as clever.
Well, the Randy Forestry podcast is pretty darn good, and the logo is cool and everything. Yeah, and so when I started, it was difficult. Tools like you're using with this Riverside FM and stuff, they didn't work. That didn't exist. I slept around at people's offices with a little Zoom H4n recorder and a couple of lapel mics and cranked them out. But that aside, probably what's more interesting is what I was really trying to do was advance entrepreneurship in Maine. And a lot of people are familiar with the How I Built This podcast. I wanted it to sort of be like How I Built This for Maine. So celebrating leaders in Maine who have built companies and had successes and kind of tell their stories. And it was kind of gratifying. It was pushing the thing ahead was hard sometimes, but I ended up getting it on WGAN radio as well. And that really, really extended the reach. But I hit 100 episodes. I felt like, okay, I did what I came to do. And now I get to listen to great podcasts like yours and have had some experience with it. And I think I'm a huge podcast guy. I mean, even as a Biddeford City Councilor, the Maine Municipal Association has one called Potholes in Politics, which that's a very niche audience of Maine City Councilors, but that one is great. Who'd have thunk it? And, I can do it while I'm folding the laundry or something.
Well, that's the great thing about podcasts. You can find a podcast on any topic that you want. As niche as what you just mentioned, there's probably things that are more niche than that.
I think it's a secret weapon. I really do. If I have a meeting with, a new prospective member, say E2Tech, and they're in offshore wind or something, and I want to act like I know what I'm talking about, I'll punch in offshore wind to the search and I'll listen, for an hour on the way there. And they always say, wow, this guy's up to date, Yeah.
And honestly, they may have even been on a podcast themselves at this point.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I love how it's all coming together, and it's nice to see the production values and everything. So yeah, I've got the archive somewhere on a thumb drive. It's not online anymore, but I really had a good experience with that show. And I applaud you for keeping this one on a regular publishing schedule. That was something I did not do. And
really? Okay.
Not good for leadership.
That was one of the things that I really wanted to commit to when I do. I'm going to do it every week. And this is actually going to be my 50th episode with you mentioning that you got up to 100. But that's the thing for me. And
I guess 50.
I'm like one of those. 50, yes. Who knows if I'll make it to 100 or not, but it was very important for me to stick with that consistent schedule. And I was actually looking at your list of guests, and that's an awesome list of guests that you had on. And I think some episodes that I do kind of touch on what you did, and I also find that to be very gratifying to talk about people's stories and how they got to where they are. I also mix in some other stuff here and there, but mine's maybe a little bit more of a variety show, but it is cool to see all the guests that you have on there. Saw that you had Angus King on there, which is cool.
Yeah, he was great, and I think I take some credit for inspiring his podcast. It's one of the things he told me. I've been looking into starting, and he, of course, is way more reach than I had or will ever have.
I didn't even know he had a podcast.
He does, yeah, Inside Maine, and it's good. He does a great job with it. So I think I was probably one of the first times he guested on a podcast. He had me to his house in Brunswick together with the local rep, Bonnie Pothier, former mayor of Biddeford.
Oh, Bonnie.
Sat around.
I figured Bonnie was involved.
Bonnie is amazing, incredible. And, we had this great conversation. We could have talked all afternoon. Of course, he had the decking for my company because he was governor at the time when we started, and so that was fun to look at. And Inside Maine, Angus does a great job with that, and it comes out once a month, and it's a good one to check out.
I'll have to subscribe. So good run with the podcast. I know it says you're on break, so you're always open to the possibility of coming back. All right, I mean, keeping the door open.
You never know. Yep.
The tools though have changed. Like you said, the idea of bringing these recorders and going to people's houses and offices. I mean, this stuff that we're doing this through makes things so easy. It's just 30 minutes talking and then that's it.
It's pretty cool.
Package it up and then you're online.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to talk to you about was you're a Biddeford City Councilor. You're in your first term.
Yep.
How's that been?
Ward 3. Yep. He took over for Steve St. Cyr. Did a great job, served for 8 years, decided not to pursue re-election. And Mayor Cassavant contacted me and asked me if I'd be interested. It's an intense job. I mean, there's a lot going on in Biddeford, good stuff, but just so much to juggle. Sometimes I wonder about how do we get it all done? And we're in budget season right now, as you know, and trying to minimize taxes while at the same time we have this intense need for social services around homelessness, mental health support, programs for kids, schools, and so forth. So I think I'm kind of coming into my own a little bit on it. It was sort of the same when I was a legislator, where you're just, whoa, and then you kind of get in the cycle. This is my second budget season now, so I have kind of a better understanding of how it all runs. And it's quicker than the legislature. I mean, we meet every 2 weeks, and we can propose and pass an ordinance in a month, and it becomes effective, immediately as we walk out of the meeting. So the legislature is not like that, where, that's kind of more of a 2-year cycle. So I think that's a good thing in a way, and it lets us just be responsive. So, constituents contact me with all number of issues, for everything from, my neighbor has a illegal number of junk cars in his driveway to, my kids don't feel safe walking to school, or I'm always very focused on supporting and helping veterans and things like that. So I always like that about the job as legislator, and that's what I like about the city council job too, is helping sort out any issue that you might have with City Hall and that kind of thing. So overall, it's an honor to do it. Pays $100 a month. I don't think Biddeford is overflowing with people that want to run for the council, so I certainly encourage people to get involved if they want to. The election is in odd years, so it's coming up this fall.
It's one of those things that crosses my mind. I've always been a person that I don't feel like I can complain about something unless I'm actually actively trying to find the solution. So when there's something that's not going right in the city that I live in, my first thought is like, well, I should just join the city council to try to have an impact. And that's honestly why I'm on the school board. And I can relate to a lot of what you said about, it takes a little while to kind of get your footing. It's been 3 years since I've been at, maybe even longer than that. I still feel like I'm learning stuff. So it does take a little bit of time, but as far as meeting goes, you guys meet every 2 weeks, but what's the workload besides that? Are you doing subcommittee meetings all the time?
Yeah, you do. Counselors get assigned to usually 2 other commissions. I chaired, before as a counselor, the Solid Waste and Recycling Commission for many, many years, so I try to avoid that one. But yes, I always joke, it's like every Tuesday and Thursday night for the rest of your life. I know you on the school committee, Wednesday nights, I think you have a similar workload. And, often we do hear from, legendary local people who've been involved with the council, like Richard Rames or Randy Seaver, that, these things used to go till 11:30 at night or something. That's not the case as much, but on the day we're recording this is a Tuesday. There is one tonight. It would start at 6. We have a bunch of budget-related stuff on there, some housing-related stuff. I'd be shocked if we got out of there before 8:30 or 9, because you want, I'm always somebody who wants to draw out the discussion and try to find consensus. And if we have somebody presenting to us, a local expert, or maybe our economic development director, Greg Mitchell, or something, I want to ask him a lot of questions. Of course, it extends the meeting, but usually it leads to like a greater consensus too. So yeah, it is quite a commitment. But obviously you'd be great at it, Randy. And I know the city would be honored to have you in whatever role that you want to do. I think, that's what it takes. To be honest, we don't see a ton of people at the meetings. I'm told that, in the past that was also different. It's pretty routine for there just to be 3 people at the meeting or something like that.
Same for the school committee.
Yeah.
It's the engagement in all of that stuff on the community level. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's there, but everyone's quick to complain on social media and, just complain in general, but no one is at these meetings and sharing input and trying to be constructive about the issues that they face. So that part's a concern for me. I don't know. It's probably just a sign of the times and how caught up in their life everyone is.
People are busy. I mean, you can join them online now, which is amazing. I mean, I as a counselor try not to make a habit of it, but it does happen. Obviously you're traveling or there's a family situation or something like that. And members of the public, they do join online and it works well. I have to say, I'm really impressed with that. And so that is an option. And then they're recorded. I just watched the planning board meeting, on the recording. I guess it competed with listening to your podcast. I was listening to the Biddeford Planning Board, but one of the commissions I'm on is the Affordable Housing Commission. And so I just wanted to listen to the, the planning board deliberate on that. So you just think 5 years ago, you couldn't do that. So that's a great involvement tool. I definitely recommend doing that. Yeah,
the pandemic did seem to push all that stuff forward and accelerate the adoption of all that stuff. So it does make it a little bit easier to listen.
It did help. Yes, I actually think in its way, you're right. It did help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
About affordable housing. Is that one of the bigger issues facing Biddeford and probably every community in Southern Maine, and honestly every community in the country at this point?
I mean, it's such a hot button thing. Sometimes I worry that you end up with this over focus on an issue. I'm sure you've run across this, Randy, where you can peg the needle too far, and you're in this business. So I should be asking you this question, but I'm worried it's going to swing back. We do have, I think, almost more than 1,000 housing units, as people say, that could be apartments, houses, whatever it is, in development in Biddeford. So that's a lot. That's going to take a lot of demand to fill those up. But there does seem to be a lot of demand for, this area median income. That's like your average, somebody who makes, I think, like $45,000 a year plus the cost of utilities, to make housing that works for them. We consistently hear that from the school committee, where can our teachers live? The council is making changes and pretty quickly to adapt to that. And I definitely applaud our city council and staff for pushing some of those things. And we have, as we record this, a moratorium on permitting new developments over 10 units that don't include an affordable housing element. So that's something that's moved, pretty quick. A month ago, we would have said that might not happen, and now it's enforced.
It's really interesting to me, though. What's the incentive for someone to invest their money in building property that is limited to only renting out to people that are classified under that, affordable housing income limit, or only able to pay a certain amount of rent? It's like, part of me is like, okay, we're in this capitalistic society. If people are willing to spend this money and, people are willing to build all these places, shouldn't they be able to get what they want for the rent? But at the same time, obviously people need places that are affordable to live. There's this weird balance that I'm still trying to understand in my head.
Yeah, I understand. I'm somebody who's in a little more of the carrot versus the stick. So a couple of quick things that you can do is, density bonus, right? So if you have a given project size, maybe you're going to build an apartment building that had 25 units, and if the minimum size of those apartments and or the size of building we would let you build set that 25 number, but we told you, okay, if you make 5 of them affordable, then you can build more. And so that, density bonus is what that's called.
And if you're already building it, then I guess the cost to do that's probably not that significant.
It will pencil out. I think you've hit on what is the magic. We need to find that out, and I think it's going to move around over time. Yeah, you very much do not want to have this effect where people say, okay, this is great, Biddeford. You have these restrictive new rules. I think I'll just go over to Arundel, or Lyman or something like that. Yeah. That's why I like the carrot approach. You can also, we have some pretty strict requirements around parking. We actually require you to put in a lot of parking, which, some people don't need as much. You can do, depending on where things are located. So we relax those parking requirements and return. That gives you a more lot size. Those are the kinds of things you can do. Those are like the levers that you can pull. Other things you can do is something called pattern zoning, where you would say, okay, there's 5 or 6 types of project. Maybe it's a 3-family that's pre-approved. Boom. You do not have to go to the planning board. So it doesn't save you money, but it might save you 6 or 9 months, and that is money. So I think those are the things that we can be doing. So I did not know much about this. I am not in the business like you coming into this, but I've learned a lot with Councilor Doris Ortiz, and I really have enjoyed working on this. And I hope we do break it loose and get a bunch of stuff that works for the nurse and the firefighter and the teacher to move here to Biddeford.
I see a lot of people reach out to me that were renting, and then the property sells that they were renting in. New landlord comes in, jacks up the rent because of that, or just kicks them out altogether. But because they have kids in the school system or families close by, they still want to stay in the city, but they can't find anything else. And it's like there's these single income earners that are in that situation. Longtime renters get pushed back into the market, and it's very hard and for them to find a place and even stay, probably in Southern Maine. So I don't know. It's nice to hear that there's a lot of stuff coming, but there's definitely a lot of people that are struggling right now.
Yeah.
And it's not a unique problem to Biddeford. I think it's a Southern Maine thing. It's a, across the country thing.
Well,
so
I
it's
agree.
nice that you guys are working on it.
Yeah, but I don't think there's any magic to it. I think we just got to do the work and get the stuff built, one at a time. That's always the way I've tried to look at stuff. So I'm pretty focused on that piece of things on the council.
Well, I appreciate your service.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, people don't realize the effort and time and thought that goes into all that stuff. So that, like I said, much appreciated. But why don't we leave it at that? We went over our time. So much to talk about. I feel like we could have talked another 30 minutes, but I think that hit on a lot of good stuff, and I appreciate you making time to chat with me.
Yeah, Randy, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I agree with you, and always appreciate any outreach. Just Martin Grohman at BiddefordMaine.org.
Awesome. Thanks, Marty. We'll be in touch. Have a good one.
You too.